to the Eastern Front, because the Dragon's operations on the northeast are important focus for Bharat, because it seems the Xi Jinping regime is headed towards a realignment, looking at a strategy to weaponize Myanmar's territory and the internal strife to spread chaos in Bharat's northeast. The northeast has seen several insurgencies over the last few years, and it seems the strife and economic opportunities have given some room to China to maneuver against India. First up, let's look at the economic angle that China aims to exploit vis-a-vis Myanmar. And this is exclusive information here on the Dragon's game plan on this edition of The Right Stand. Manoj Kumar Gupta getting us these details. First up, China aims to exert pressure on the northeast vis-a-vis security, economic proxies and proxy networks. So that is one of the first parts. The other thing is post-Operation Sindoor, China has established a joint security company to protect its investments in this region. China is accelerating infrastructure projects, boosting Myanmar's military capacity too. It is also fast-tracking Muse, Mandalay and the Kyakphew railway and the CMEC linked pipelines. So that is infrastructure push. Along with that, China is also going to provide tactical support against ethnic armed organizations. So the CDF, CNDF clashes have also increased, and we'll get to that in a bit. Their support for Myanmar National Democratic Alliance against the anti-junta forces. And also the mission to secure trade corridors like China-Myanmar Economic Corridor is also being accelerated. China to aid the consolidation of Myanmar's control in strategic zones near Bharat's borders. Now, China is also boosting control over trade routes in the Shan state, which borders northeast of India. China also aims to force India into a two-front challenge to manage instability in the northeast. And there, even in the northeast itself, there is the LAC dimension from Arunachal Pradesh downwards, and their pressure from there bearing down, and then from the bottom towards the south with Myanmar, southeast with Myanmar. Now, potential to also disrupt the India-Myanmar-Thailand highway and the Kaladan multimodal transit project. So these are important Bharat's infrastructure projects which may run into rough weather, because if China surrounds that entire region and then puts pressure and gets into a pincer-like situation against Bharat around the northeast. So we just have to think about how the map of Bharat looks in that region, and then we know that China is actually trying to circle and is also to protect its own Belt and Road initiatives and also convert Myanmar into a totally vassal state. The military junta is one that works in accordance with the Chinese. There are also certain zones which are no man's land, which have become the hub for gangsters, cybercrime and otherwise. Now, this also becomes a problematic development given the rise in insurgency activities in the northeast, and that has created a refugee crisis in the state of Mizoram. Top intelligence sources are telling CNN News 18 that fresh fighting reported between Chin resistance group in Myanmar and clashes between the Chin National Defense and Chinland Defense Force. Also, intelligence confirms arms trafficking in the northeast linked to the Myanmar rebels. Instability along the Indo-Myanmar border, inflow of refugees into Mizoram. Chin Unification Accord, brokered in Aizawl, has literally disintegrated. The total Myanmar refugee count in Mizoram now exceeds 35,000. Conflict for control of the Rikaudar-Phalam corridor is also on. This is very key for logistics. The threat of arms trafficking, cross-border infiltration and regional destabilization looms large. Mizoram could become a pressure point in India's eastern security, and there are other dynamics to this also. Now, this discord has also opened up several pressure points in the northeast which are causing a major security concern. There is a 510-kilometer long unfenced Indo-Myanmar border that enables unchecked movement of militants and arms near the Champai and also the Longthlai areas. 2nd of July, Chin National Defense Force actually set up checkpoints in the Khwathir village, and that And thereafter, the CNDF launched drone strikes on the CDF positions in the Satong and the Tuichi regions. 245 new refugees have now entered Mizoram through the Zokhawtar area. And the Chinzo connection, the tribal connection, Kuki-Chinzo connection, that's another larger aspect where these tribes which were anciently linked then broke away. There is now this entire feeling of brotherhood, and Mizoram very, very clearly saying that they are not going to try and they are not going to turn them back. Now, this is an issue here. Colonel Shantikumar Sapam, spokesperson of the Meitei Heritage Society, is with us. Dr. Anand Ranganathan also joining us this evening, author, political commentator, scientist here on the right stand. And we are also joined by Dr. Tongkolal Haukip, who's with us. He's the assistant professor at the Center for Study of Law and Governance at JNU. My namaste and Jai Hind to everybody. Thank you very, very much. Now, how would you assess the situation? Colonel Sapam, if I may start with you. The military junta is at conflict with some of the resistance forces. There is the China-America angle there. But for us at our borders, when we have so much strife, are we looking at some serious concerns, internal security and national security-wise?
Anandji, good evening, and thank you so much for having me in your show. What happened is, this area in the last few days, 4-5 days, a lot of refugees have, moved into Mizoram. This has been reported, and over there, it's reported. But in case of Manipur, it is not reported because we all know what is happening in Manipur. So the number of refugees would have been much more, and it's believed that more than 150 tribes, different tribes, are there in Myanmar. And since a long time, the Chinese interest in Myanmar has been there, and the business have been controlled since a long time. And at the same time, the US also has got a very big role in this fight in Myanmar. So in the bargain, the central government had taken a few steps, few decisions were taken very rightly, I would say, and it was central government has understood the genesis of the problems in the northeast, and especially Manipur and also Mizoram to a certain extent. After understanding the genesis of the problem, the clash and various things happening in the northeast, Manipur and Mizoram, not clash in Mizoram. So central government has taken to fence the area, which is the major step for the safety or for the security of this country. Fencing is very important, and FMR also it's been taken out. It's fine, okay. Coming brothers and sisters across, alike people staying over that side also, ethnic similarity is there. It's fine, okay, but then come with proper paper and with proper law, other rules and regulations. That is what the central government is saying, which has been opposed by the people around this area, which is very sad, basically. And influx is there. There's just no doubt about that. When we talk about the population increase and the villages increased in Manipur and things like that, it's very crystal clear that a lot of things are happening here and very complicated. And especially Manipur, though it's a very small state. Very small state with a population of 30 lakhs. It's very complicated, and I would say the most complicated state in the country. This is what I would like to say. So the central government has to be very firm, and I think it is very firm. Home Ministry is very firm about this fencing. It's happening there, but then a lot of resistance are there. Not to have this fence, I don't want to basically name the community.
Here what happens is, one, there is an ethnic connect, and then there is also the ethnic differences. That also spills over into the religious borderlines, because there are also religious differences now that stem. Along with that, there is also what is happening, because it is not the same lands as they were historically. These are now different boundaries, international boundaries, some of them very, very loose. The third part is, from a national security point of view, these borders, as long as they remain undefined, it is very, very easy for hegemonistic forces, expansionist forces to make their moves in. And there are entities, different powers who want to ensure that this region remains fractured. Dr. Haukip, your thoughts here?
To start with, I think we need to look into Northeast India historically as well as in terms of geography. Geographically, the Northeast region is 95% border with other countries, and only 18 years 2% in the scheduled corridors with the rest of India. And historically, the region has been politically unstable, right? This political instability has been the problem, and this is due to various demands by ethnic groups in the past, and which continues to linger till today. So, unless we solve this political problem in the region, unless we look into the problems, for instance, in recent months, we have tried to solve the problem of frontier Nagaland or the Eastern Nagas issue. So once the Eastern Naga issue is solved, then largely Nagaland can be stable politically, and we have Manipur, we have different areas in the region. So we need to look into all these demands and try to give concessions to all these demands. And once these demands and ethnic groups who are rebelling against the Indian state for a certain form of concessions are resolved, I think that we will have a very stable northeastern region. And with stability, I think the outside influence, for instance, the string of peers theory, which is not dying at all. And this calculation should never go out of our strategic or national interest. And with the stability of the region, how the political violence is looked into, and these are being resolved, that will imply a lot to the future. So I think at this juncture, there's quite a lot of work needed to be done by the Home Ministry or the Indian government to look into all these kind of demands by smaller ethnic groups and settled. It's not only about development, connecting big roads with the other part of India. It's also about political solutions. And if we have a stable Northeast, then I think the kind of problems that we have from outside the region, for instance, from Myanmar, from Bangladesh, this could be resolved to a large extent. And we need to have confidence of the tribes and the communities in the region to have a strong Bharat, right? So during partition and during the division of between British India and Burma, many communities were segregated on the borders, and many people or many communities in this region have sympathy over their own ethnic groups who are on the other side of the border. So unless people in these border regions are politically taken into account, their demands,
but what is the extent of these demands? Whatever are these demands have to be in line with the constitution of our country and also aligned to the national interests. Now there is a huge amount of funding that is coming in from entities who don't want a resolution to happen. That is also a reality. And somewhere the religious lines that have been drawn, and the fights where you're trying to align tribes and groups not because of their heritage or their history, but more because of their religious affiliations, that is also a problem in that region. So it is very, very complex. Small states, very important states, but then very, very complex equations here, and especially at a border that is porous. 510 kilometers of our border porous there, Professor Ranganathan. There is 600 odd kilometers of borders which are open with Bangladesh, and more than 3,500 or 4,000 kilometers that is open with occupied Chinese territory and also with China. So we are very, very vulnerable on the eastern front.
Good evening, Anand. First of all, and good evening to my fellow panelists, both of whom are experts. So I speak as a layman here. But first of all, I need to thank you for consistently focusing on the Northeast and having such debates, because it's important. There is absolutely no doubt about it that even in our political circles internally, the issues of Northeast, especially the security, are often neglected. So thank you. Anand, the way I see this as a layman, the problem is actually threefold. The problem is external. That will be my first point. The problem is internal. And the problem is on the fence, literally on the fence. So let me talk about these three issues very briefly. As you've already elucidated, India's border with Myanmar, particularly that 500 kilometer stretch through Mizoram. Yes, you're right. It poses significant security challenges due to its porous nature and complex socio-political dynamics. The free movement regime, the FMR, allowing visa-free travel up to 10 kilometers across the border actually has been exploited by insurgents, drug traffickers, and arms smugglers. The problem is that rugged terrain with dense forests and mountains, and it hampers effective patrolling by the Assam Rifles, which, by the way, deploys only 15 of its 46 battalions for border guarding. Insurgent groups like NSC and K find safe havens in Myanmar. We know that. And, all the drone surveillance has actually proved that. It is facilitated by ethnic ties with Myanmar's political instability post 2021 coup. Drug trafficking, particularly opium from Myanmar's Golden Triangle, is also fueling socio-economic issues in the northeast. Human trafficking, illegal immigration, including Chin refugees, you mentioned about that, further strain resources. Now, India's plan to fence the entire border with 401 kilometers to be completed by, incidentally, this month, faces resistance from local tribes. They fear disruption of cultural ties. I think that has to be tackled first. And the lack of Myanmar's cooperation as well is a problem, combined with, of course, and I'll come to that in a second, China's growing influence through radar deployments, infrastructure projects, and support to Myanmar's Janta. It heightens the threat. The strategic maneuvering by China along the border is actually undermining security. Now, let me very briefly come to the other issue, because that's internal. Because mainland access to the northeast is constrained by the so-called chicken neck Siliguri Pass, 95% of all northeast trade goes through this chicken neck. India has now planned two economic corridors, the Bhutan-Bodoland Bay of Bengal B3 corridor and the Hill-Mahendraganj Transnational Economic or HMT corridor.
Yes.
They will, when complete, revolutionize connectivity, trade and security in the entire region. For example, the 100-kilometer HMT corridor will cut travel time and cost by half. And that is what is troubling China and its newfound poodle Yunus. Bangladesh is flanked by hill in the West Bengal and Mahendraganj in the Garo Hills of Meghalaya. To connect them would mean bypassing the entire chicken neck and cut travel distance by 700 kilometers. National Highways Authority and Indian Railways has already conducted a survey, but then came the coup in Bangladesh, and now there is a Chinese and Pakistani puppet in place. It goes without saying that China wouldn't want this corridor, and that is why this ventriloquist is speaking through the puppet. But the other corridor, the B3 corridor, is a more secure and strategic initiative to connect Bhutan with the Bay of Bengal through Assam and Meghalaya. There will be key transit points like Jogi Jhopa in Bodoland and Phulbari in Meghalaya that will serve as logistical hubs for the B3 corridor, allowing access to water, rail and road cargo, providing us with access to Bhutan's markets. Importantly, 10 seconds. Northeast, especially Bodoland, will become rich and economically more stable. And that is what China doesn't want. So the entire issue, as put very succinctly by you and the panelists, is that China is trying to actually not allow India to actually act in its favor externally, internally, and literally on the fence.
Yeah, not just along with on the fence, even Bhutan there is a pressure point there. There is Bhutanese territory where again, time and again, China wants to swap and make a straight swap of territory which is part of the natural reserve, and India has blocked it often. It all stems around the Doklam region and of course the entire natural reserve there, where the Chinese have often offered to the Bhutanese that we'll swap this. But the moment that swap happens, there will be a problem with this corridor that they plan to build. But there are, like you said, internal reasons. Before I go back to Colonel Sapam, viewers, there is also this entire alarm over the lack of internal cohesion, which is a challenge. And this threat, as per top intelligence sources, say it is a serious one. Mizoram's open support for the Kuki-Zo cause has worsened ties with Manipur. And after threats from insurgent-linked groups, 184 Meitei fled Mizoram in 2023. Those numbers are far greater than as being reported. We must put that caveat here. There is a deepening ethnic mistrust also that has led to increased interstate surveillance. Northeast states are struggling with planned containment and humanitarian coordination. So now how do we take this forward, Colonel Sapam? Because if there is a fight between Meitei and Kuki, and here on the right stand we put out that in a recent raid in Chittagong at a garment factory in Bangladesh, there were more than 30,000 uniforms that were being made for a Kuki-Chin front. And then there were other uniforms being made for insurgent groups which are operating in this region along with the Chin corridor, but they are based in Bangladesh. So there are serious concerns internally too.
Anandji, what I perceive is that basically there's not a clash between the Meiteis and the Kukis. The clash is because of the powers, basically. The powers who are, who are in power, basically, because of that. instructions are being passed by these powerful people, and thereafter, things happen basically. And it turns out to be, it projected as ethnic clash basically. It's not ethnic clash. There are many people who, they ring me up, they tell me about the things what is happening over here, and they feel very sad about this. And they are also looking forward to peace coming to Manipur and things like that. I'm talking about the other people from the other community. It is not a clash basically. It is a pre-planned agenda with the various activities going on in the northeast and in Burma. And Burma has been always the boil since a very long time, since the beginning. After the British left, there have been always a fight in Burma. Myanmar, which is Myanmar now. And, as we said, the struggle for power, Chinese influence and US influence, all these things are there. And we also must understand that the Burma will never end. It will continue. It will continue. It's not that the Kuki people or the Jaw people, the citizens, they want this type of clash, or the Meitei wants this clash. No, it is not so. But then when we see it, the agenda or the aim of Christian country and all those things are very clear. One may say that it is not so and all, but it is very clear. It is very crystal clear. This is what I would like to say. And if the common people, if we do not take the stand and go with the instructions given by the Home Ministry, I think this conflict will continue. This is what I would like to say.
Right. Dr.
We'll have to respect.
Somewhere there has to be underlined, Dr. Haukip, that the internal issues need to be resolved, set aside and done peacefully. And anybody trying to weaponize groups within our country should be dissuaded and thwarted locally also, irrespective of differences. Because we have a greater duty to the nation, and that needs to be underlined. I think a lot of amends have been made. Things have changed in the last decade and a half compared to how it was. There was a time when the northeast of our country was totally neglected, and there was a huge sense of alienation because it was blind spotted. But that's not the case today, Dr. Haukip. And I think many would realize that.
I totally agree with you. What is lacking in the Northeast right now is, you have pointed out that the lack of internal cohesion, right? That's exactly why I say, the political demands has to be looked into carefully and without delay, right? Without further delay, concessions has to be made within the Constitution of India. I'm talking about political solutions, not within or outside the Constitution of India. I'm talking about how constitutionally these demands can be resolved peacefully. So if we have a peaceful Northeast or internally cohesive Northeast, then the external threats would be minimized to a large extent, and problems could be solved within the region itself. And external threats could, be, met in unison with, different communities. So what I, has been emphasizing is about how we solve these, political problems within the region. We have frontier Nagaland problem. We have the problem of Arunachal Pradesh. We have several demands in Manipur. We have other groups in Tripura and Meghalaya, with certain demands. For instance, the ILP demand in Meghalaya, which has been raising for the last 30, 40 years. So how do we look into it? All these demands, I think we need to seriously look into it. The demands in Karbi Anglong, Dima Hasa, all this has to be settled peacefully. And then with that settlement, I think we will have a peaceful Northeast where you have a cohesive, communities in this region.
Right.
And with that, we can think about external threats, internal linkage, external linkage. All these, discussions can be put forward. So what we need right now is, the commitment of the Home Ministry to solve all these issues within the framework of the Indian Constitution.
Yes. Yes, Anandji.
And I almost entirely agree with the good Professor Hawkip, except to say, just add a few bits of my own. You see, I think this government has been, no doubt about it, very proactive in assimilating the hitherto ignored areas of India. But here's the thing, it almost always wants to approach solving the issues through building infrastructure and connectivity. I mean, it goes beyond saying, I mean, you look at Kashmir, for example, the kind of infrastructure buildup that Kashmir has had is unprecedented. It's not had it in the last 60 years, what it has in the last 5 years. The same goes for Northeast. But here is the thing. Unless you also tackle the political situation, which of course in Kashmir has to be tackled resolutely, so in the Northeast, I'm afraid you can build as much infrastructure as you want. The problem is not going to be solved. Now, I'll give you just 10 seconds the example out here. It was the Congress government at the center and at Manipur, the state, which the previous panelist talked about the acrimony. All it asked for was a white paper to resolve the tribal acrimony as far as the reservations were concerned. That did not happen. The governments at both center and the states changed to BJP. They did exactly the same thing, asked for a white paper. That didn't happen. The High Court stepped in, asked for the same thing. And we know what happened in the last 2 years. The whole state was on the boil. So much so, talk about being resolute, the opposite happened. Anand, the High Court had to redact its request. So unless we ourselves are resolute about solving the political situation, I'm afraid you can add as much connectivity and infrastructure to to the cauldron, but it might not solve the issue. That is my problem.
Fair point. And yes, Colonel Sapam, final word, sir. We got big news coming through.
Yes. What I would like to submit is, any party or any group or any community may demand whatever they feel right for them or for their welfare. Separate administration, there was a big rally in 2016 also in Manipur by the Kugis. When the Meiteis have requested for ST, I think it is the central government who is supposed to whether give it or not to give it. Other community, when this separate administration was demanded by the Kugis in 2016 and 1969, the Meiteis never said anything. It was a demand to the government of India or let's say government of Manipur.
Right.
But when the Meiteis, when they demanded the ST status for them, it came down to burning of houses, raping of females, killing. It's very atrocious because.
It is atrocious, but the larger question is, was it motivated, was it indicated, was it pushed from with certain ulterior motives to try and deliberately stoke this fire? That's the larger question. And who's weaponizing them? Who's allowing them to get into this entire opium trade? Why are the hills now becoming into opium fields? These are questions that need to be asked. There is somebody who's buying all this opium, right? There is somebody who's also supplying all these arms and weapons. Somewhere these entities are backing them. Which are these entities? Let's call them out. And I think from there on, the rest of it would also come through. Now, you can't clap with one hand. Both sides have to drop back, push back, and pull back, and then also take a larger, far greater worldview than getting into this day-to-day thing about who's bigger than whom and whose ego is greater, etc. I'm just saying, conflict resolution will come only when both sides want to resolve it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And it stems from this entire thing is that the other person is here to wipe me out. Moment that fear, that threat is negated, it's done away with, the conflict is resolved. That's where it is. Thank you, gentlemen. Dr. Ranganathan, do stay on with us. But big news coming through before we move on to our other big story here on The Right Stand. The preliminary report that is of AI 171, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, AAIB, is expected to submit on AI 171 crash may establish double engine failure as the primary cause for the accident. Initial report findings suggest engines had lost power, not allowing the Dreamliner 787 to climb. Investigators are now zeroing in on the cause of loss of thrust. Initial probe says is in the final phases. preliminary report is set to be out very, very soon. The details we'll share here on CNN News 18. But Anvit is joining us with more. Anvit, this confirms what initial assessment of experts was and what we put out here at CNN News 18, that the double engine failure was the loss of thrust, and that's why there was loss of thrust, and that's where this entire crash happened. But the larger question is, what caused the double engine failure? Was it fuel contamination or something else? Was it negligence or deliberate sabotage?
Yes, Anand, since the beginning when the news came out and when it came out that the pilots had at the last moment conveyed it to the air traffic control and they had given a mayday message and they had said no thrust. Since the beginning, it has been speculated that it could be dual engine failure. However, this was being said to be a rarest of the rare phenomena with any aircraft, be it the wide-body Dreamliner 787. This certainly is a rare phenomena, but what the experts are suggesting is that the probe is heading in a direction where it could zero upon the dual engine failure cause, and it is being looked at that what could be the possible causes which have led to no thrust and not allowing the aircraft to further climb altitude when it took from Ahmedabad. Also, there could be multiple reasons, like you mentioned, fuel contamination. There could also be technical reasons and instrumental reasons behind it. In fact, human intervention is also one thing that is being looked at. Previously, we had heard the minister say that the sabotage angle is also being looked at. But
Right.
we when speak to the experts and the sources in the DGCA, they have suggested that human intervention, like the maintenance log book, is also being looked at. And at the last moments, what were the conversations in flight in this last moment, and also the data that it was transmitting through satellite telemetry, that is also something being looked into. So multiple factors are being looked in and being factored in, not just human intervention like the maintenance and the fueling of the aircraft, but also the data it had transmitted when it had flown from Delhi to Ahmedabad, and then when it was flying from Ahmedabad to Gatwick when the incident took place. Those 30 moments when the aircraft was airborne, in those 30 seconds, what had transpired and what data was transmitted to the ATC, that is something that the investigators are looking at to find out actually what transpired that did not allow the aircraft to climb. So the focus right now is to find out that what led to dual engine failure. Likely this is to come out later this week. And the government will make public.
But that is the core. Now, how long before they get to the cause? What triggered the engine failure? Because experts have said here at CNN News 18 that dual engine failure can only happen if there was a problem with the fuel injection into the engines, and that comes from the central fuel tank. The Boeing 787, that's what the experts said, is configured in such a way that while takeoff, the fuel source is singular, that is the central fuel tank. And if the engine can fail during takeoff, only if there is no fuel that is being injected into the engines. So, are they moving in that direction? Because that's the expert understanding here. Are investigators getting to that? Because there are other speculations that it could have been remotely triggered. It could have been hacked in such a way that the computer systems failed.
See, the sabotage angle certainly is being looked at. Also, cyber intervention is what they are looking at. But at the right moment, see, the preliminary report will most likely only mention what led to the crash.
Right.
Eventually, the detailed investigation by the AIB, which will take months and may also take a year or and a half, that will finally, come to the conclusion as to actually what led and what technical or manual intervention led to this crash. But initial report is expected to only give a direction as to why this crash happened, and give a basic detail of why the crash took place. The detailed investigation will certainly follow, but that may take some time.
Right. Thank you for your input, Sanvit. Thank you. Shifting focus, more revelations coming in with respect to the China-Pakistan nexus and how they made and or endeavored or effected a coordinated information war against Bharat. CNN News 18 has accessed a government cyber report confirming Pakistan's direct role in spreading disinformation against Bharat. According to the report, Indian cyber agencies tracked a network of fake accounts and propaganda handles allegedly linked to Pakistan's military and intelligence, pushing false narratives to influence perception during the conflict, and this was during Operation Sindoor. More than that, the top intelligence sources are also now confirming a joint PSYOPs by China and Pakistan aimed at discrediting Bharat's military capability, military technology, both indigenous and bought. So more importantly, the Rafale fighter jets. The operation, disguised as wartime fallout, was engineered to weaken Bharat's defense image and promote Chinese stealth jets globally. Let's try and decode that further. China is eyeing tier 1 arms market entry, and it's all about the big military industrial complex. Also, DGISPR used to promote Chinese weapons openly. China pressing Rafale clients to actually withdraw from their orders. And there were, in fact, reports suggest, intel sources tell CNN News18, bribes were offered to cancel Rafale deal. Bribes were offered to cancel the Rafale deal. The J-35A was offered with a 50% discount. Even Pakistan has been offered an entire fleet of J-35s at 50% discount, and they said they will deliver it by August. J-35A and even J-17 offered with 50% discount. How does China have such a fleet of aircraft which are ready to be sold within such short time? That itself shows that they're sitting on inventory and they've not been able to sell it. Pakistan's endorsement used to push J-35A and J-17. And they also say forged cables claiming France advised Rafale grounding. So these were deep fakes and forged cables that were also shared, that were pushed around to create this entire false sense of panic and discredit the Rafale altogether. Dassault, French Ministry of Defense, have denied the grounding claim outright. But where did this stem from? That's another question. Now, if we take a look further and see how these fighters stack up, let's try and understand this in detail. Let's compare the Rafale and the JF-17. Where do they? Are they like to like? Do they match up with each other? Why is it that there is this effort to try and discredit the Rafale vis-a-vis the JF-17? The Rafale has a range of 1,850 kilometers. The JF-17 can go up to 3,482 kilometers. So the Rafale will need mid-air refueling. The JF-17 can do longer distances, but in terms of altitudes, the JF-17s cannot climb from high altitude air bases. Now, max speed, Rafale can touch a max speed of 1.8 Mach. The JF-17 is slower at 1.6 Mach, but not so far off. Service ceiling, Rafale 15,235 meters. That's the level to which the Rafale can climb. The JF-17s can climb up to 16,900 meters, so they can go up to higher altitudes. The wingspan of the Rafale is 10.9 meters. The JF-17 is 9.45 meters, so JF-17 is a smaller aircraft in terms of spread or wingspan. Weapons, the Rafale can carry a 30 mm Giat internal cannon, 14 external missiles, precision-guided weapons. The JF-17 can carry a 23 mm GSH twin-barrel cannon, 7 external missiles, and a so that's one part. Here the Rafale outbeats the JF-17 with respect to payload and the kind of weapon systems that it can carry. Global squadrons, the Rafale is now with Bharat, with France. JF-17 with China, Pakistan, Myanmar, Nigeria, Azerbaijan. But there are fresh orders for the Rafale that have now been placed by certain African nations too. And there are nations in South Asia who are also looking at the Rafale as an option. Dr. Ranganathan is with us, and we also have Andrew Kepilung joining us, China strategist. So, Andrew Kepilung, my first question when China said Pakistan can get an entire fleet of JF-35s, and they said we'll give it to you by August 2025. I was wondering who holds so many aircrafts in stock.
Of course, China's aircraft fleet is quite large by comparison with most of its neighbors. And the J-20, for example, the J-10 or the J-20 are some of the cutting edge. It's a generation 4.5 kind of aircraft. And China's already reported to be developing generation, even the 5th generation aircraft, or even higher. But talking about disinformation, I think all countries are practicing it to some extent. And of course, China is no exception. India is no exception. I can quote examples for India. For example, the incident with Canada with the assassination of some separatists, and there are different stories. And as far as the war, the recent air conflict between India and Pakistan is concerned, both sides are claiming victory. And the number of aircraft down on the Indian side are highly disputed. Now, as far as the comparison of these aircraft are concerned, I Googled it. Of course, I'm not party to any of these conflicts. And it's said that the Chinese J-10 aircraft, or it could be renamed JF 16 or 17. Yeah, 17. Has been is generally regarded even by Western media like Reuters as a very advanced aircraft. And then even the French side, the French aircraft.
But you will admit, Andrew, you would admit
they also admitted at least one aircraft was down. Now, the French aircraft, of course, is a state-of-the-art aircraft on the French side. So there is a bit of rhetoric on both sides, and as I was saying, that disinformation is a common.
But you would admit
no exception.
No, you would admit that the Chinese have more at stake because 81% of Pakistani arsenal today is Chinese. Their entire fleet is Chinese. So how it performs in a conflict, how Chinese equipment performs in a conflict has so much more at stake. There must be a reason why the military-industrial complex or stocks of the Chinese military dropped nearly 8 to 9% on the 9th of May. There must be a reason why, right? So you have to concede that there, and clearly there would be an effort to control damage. There would be an effort to manage perception. There would be an effort. You know the number of nations that put their orders on hold. There were 5 or 6 African nations who put their 3 or 4 African nations who put their offers on hold or their interest on hold with Chinese aircraft and Chinese military equipment, especially their air defense systems too. The PF-15 missiles that landed the dud, it could not self-damage, self-destruct, and it landed, it just dropped on Indian soil, and we've got the entire PF-15 with us to try and study the entire missile. You know, it's all picture. I'm not even saying speculatory rhetoric, but you know that the Chinese have more at stake there. You would at least accept that. And there is a reason why they want to manage perception.
Well, what I'm saying, that this is a practice all countries has been engaged in all the time. I mean, all countries are look after their interests, and there are ways of twist the story one side or another.
So there is more reason for the Chinese to do it because they have so much more at stake. So we have to concede that there. But Professor Ranganathan, this entire psyops was not to perhaps hurt Bharat, but to ensure that they don't get hurt. The Chinese military-industrial complex doesn't get damaged. 9% drop in stocks within a few hours of the BrahMos landing there, and Noor Khan and the Pak air bases being demolished.
No, absolutely. But, you know, I mean, the thing with sitting on the fence, Anand, is that more often than not, you end up having indentations of barbed wire on your backside. With due respect, you know, I'd like to ask, you know, my fellow panelist, Mr. Leung, who is a strategist expert. You know, as the adage goes, if one party says it's raining outside and the other party says no, it's not, you're not supposed to quote both parties. You're supposed to look out the window and see for yourself as a strategist whether it's raining or not. Now, he said that both sides in Operation Sindoor were claiming victories. I'd like to ask him a very simple question. Chinese satellites have printed photographs of Indian Air Force and our missile systems demolishing 11 air bases of Pakistan, their terror hideouts. In his view, I want him to look out the window and tell us, is there any Chinese or Pakistani satellite imagery of Pakistan through missiles or its air force having destroyed our air bases? It's a simple question, Mr. Ling.
Well, as I said, there was something as a fact check. And I'm not quoting my own, you know, sort of the government of China sources. Look at the international Western media like Reuters, highly respected, and they reported on the outcome. As I was saying, that even the French company itself claim that at least one aircraft was down. Now, you're referring to the destruction of the bases, but that's an entirely different thing. And what the victory was claimed on the Pakistan side and perhaps on the Chinese side is that the comparison with the performance of the aircraft. And then there is a story which I read recently. It's from the Western media. Let me finish, please. From the French side, saying that, well, nothing wrong with the aircraft. It's just that the Indian fighters themselves on the aircraft, they were not sufficiently trained. So I think that, which side are you going to believe? So I think that this is what I'm trying to say.
Well, we saw the Chinese actually say that about the Pakistanis, and the Americans say that about the Pakistanis, that there's nothing wrong with the aircraft. The problem with the because the entire fleets were disabled and they the other thing is, sir, Western media, Andrew Kepiliong, Andrew, the Western media reported dogfights, Top Gun-like dogfights on the Srinagar skies. As a strategic expert, can you even believe that could have happened today, when aircrafts can find themselves and search and seek and destroy even without seeing each other physically? That 50 to 100 kilometer distance. How can you have dogfights today in today's day and age? But they reported on the skies that these were dogfights that happened. So clearly, reputed newspapers and reputed agencies can also get things wrong, or perhaps succumb to a certain amount of misinformation.
You're talking about generation 4.5 generation aircraft. They're capable of doing that using radar and then highly guided, precision missiles, which can project a very, very long distance.
Yes, sir. That's what I'm saying. 50 to 100 kilometers. That's what I'm saying. So if the distance is 50 to 100 kilometers away, they can strike at each other without even having to physically be able to see it. They can sense each other, right? And radar systems, signaling systems are such that even as the aircrafts are getting on the runway and they are about to take off, the enemy can know. They will know the movements. At the risk of, opening up your own radar installation. So all of this is possible. So Chinese technology, the Chinese defense system could not figure out how the BrahMos moved in. The Chinese defense systems did not know the difference between a decoy and an actual plane. They got downed by loitering munitions in Lahore. So those are Chinese defense systems. It's the reality. You saw the PF. We have pictures of the PF-15 landing like a dud on Indian soil because that missile malfunctioned. This is bad news for military industrial complex. This is bad news. Just like the F-35 being grounded for 40 days in Kerala of the Royal Air Force.
You don't allow me to speak.
It is. So we understand. Yes, Professor Raghunath. So we have to also go with the evidence, sir. We have to go with the evidence.
No, what the point of the
just let Dr. Ranganathan speak, and then I'll give you a final word.
Right.
Sure. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, with due respect to Andrew G, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me calling him Andrew G. I'll come to the planes in a minute, but I want, because he is a strategic expert and I'm a layman, I want to ask him a very simple question. He has seen satellite imagery being published in Western media and Chinese media about the bombed air bases of Pakistan, the bombed terror hideouts of Pakistan. Has he, as a direct question, has he seen satellite imagery of Indian air bases bombed?
Oh, I haven't. No, because I'm not. Let me qualify by saying that I'm not an all-seeing, all-knowing person. All right, no person is, including our TA anchor.
No, but Andrew, all right? if there were Indian air bases that had been bombed, the world would have seen the images. The Chinese and the Pakistanis, so frankly, I'll be honest with you, the Chinese and the Pakistanis on the 9th of May claimed that the Udhampur airbase had been damaged and that an S-400 missile defense system had been negated. Now, in 3 days, 3 days later on the 12th of May, Prime Minister Narendra Modi touched down on the Udhampur airbase and he stood there addressing the people there, the forces there with the S-400 right behind him. Now,
Well,
please,
you ought to
even
allow me to
Houdini, sir, even Houdini cannot manufacture an airbase
You
in
said
3
it's
days,
time for me to
a
speak,
damaged
right?
airface, nor can Houdini also make a S400 appear within 3 days of its being destroyed. It's not possible.
Right.
So,
No.
so who was informing and who was misinforming?
Let me just say two things very, very quickly, and I'll shut up.
Okay.
Let you carry on with the other side of the story. Firstly, I think that both the Chinese side and the Pakistan side seems to be focusing on air-to-air combat, and nothing, very little on the ground destruction of hostile forces hideouts. You know? So that's the rhetoric. But you may well be right. I mean, as far as the victory, how victory is defined, it is not defined in air-to-air combat. The comparison capability of the aircraft is defined in terms of destruction of.
But that's where the changing face of warfare is also, Andrew, because Iran, Israel fought in the air. They fought in the air 1,500 kilometers apart. And the Pakistanis targeted India's air bases using Chinese equipment and Turkish drones. And Turkish drones. That's what happened. I have to move on. It's a great conversation. It's a fun conversation on a very serious topic. But then I thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. I have to move on. We've got another update to share with our viewers here on the Right Stand before we run out of time. Now, this is shifting focus and closer home. This is about the grooming gangs and the crackdown that's happening in Uttar Pradesh. After Jalaluddin, his brother, and that entire network was brought down, there is this entire conversion racket that was unearthed in Uttar Pradesh. Anti-terrorism squad of Uttar Pradesh police has dismantled 100 crore illegal conversion racket which cheated and even coerced girls to convert to Islam, with a trafficking and funding racket that expanded beyond Uttar Pradesh all across Bharat and even into the Gulf nations. In fact, investigation has revealed a caste rate card was implemented to target girls, and a price was set. So lower caste, lesser price, higher the caste in terms of Kshatriya, Brahmin, etc., higher the price for the girls. Now, Jamaluddin, alias Changur Baba, who carried a 50,000 rupee bounty, has been arrested along with his associates. Demolition orders were issued against the mastermind, who is now facing bulldozer action, and this is to his palatial residence in Balrampur. Changur Baba's mansion has now been razed to the ground. Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath assuring strict action. He has said, and I quote, "The government is committed to the dignity and safety of sisters and daughters. UP government won't tolerate any laxity in matters of law and order. Properties of accused and criminals will be confiscated." Let us remind our viewers about the nature of this entire racket that we exposed here on the Right Stand on Monday. The gang lured Hindu girls into relationships using false identities and promises of marriage. Once trapped, victims were taken to a dargah run by Jamaluddin, alias Changur Baba. Changur means one with 6 fingers in Hindi. Now, Hindu girls were converted to Islam and given Muslim names by Changur Baba. Promise of a better life, financial security and protection was often used as bait. Religious texts were also used for ideological indoctrination and brainwashing. The gang used a religious book titled Shijare-e-Tayyaba by Jamaluddin, alias Changur Baba. Those who resisted were reportedly threatened with false criminal cases. Case study like that of Gunja Gupta, who was trapped by Abu Ansari, who introduced himself as Amit. So again by fraud, by misrepresentation. And then Gunja Gupta was later taken to the dargah and renamed as Alina Ansari. There was also a caste rate card in effect. The gang had fixed conversion rates based on castes of victims. Gang set rupees 15 to 16 lakh rupees for a Brahmin girl, Kshatriya girl or a Sikh girl. Gang set 10 to 12 lakh rupees for backward caste tribal girl. Gang set a rate of 8 to 10 lakh rupees for girls from other communities. In fact, the money trail extends to the Gulf. Funding for this entire conversion racket had actually come from various countries from the Gulf. On that note, we're going to wind up this edition of The Right Stand. Stay with us, brass tacks, after the break. Bye for now.
Co-presented. This is News 18 Network. India's India's largest news network.
We've made a deal with United Kingdom. We've made a deal with China. We've made a deal. We're close to making a deal with India. Others we met with, and we don't think we're going to be able to make a deal. So we just send them a letter. If you want to play ball, you have to. This is what you have to pay. So as far as I'm concerned, we're done. We're sending out letters to various countries telling them how much tariffs they have to pay. Some will maybe adjust a little bit depending if they have a cause. We're not going to be unfair about it. We're always subject to negotiate something that's fair, but we've talked to most of the countries, and pretty much they've had their way for many, many decades, as you know. And it was time that we just wanted fairness. This is not really equitable from our standpoint because it's just a small token by comparison to the damage that's been done over the years. We've already taken in over $100 billion worth of tariffs, and we haven't even started. And all I say to the other countries is, some of them wanted to make a deal and want to be fair. Others perhaps got a little bit spoiled. They were a little bit spoiled because for 30, 40 years, 50 years, they were taking advantage of the country. So we're going to, I would say, final, but if they call with a different offer and if I like it, we'll do it.
US President Donald Trump produced a barrage of tariffs on Monday, as forewarned no doubt, to mark the end of that 90-day period of pause. Trump had, as we all recall, announced a very high level of tariffs on a number of countries on April the 2nd, Liberation Day, as he called it. He then offered a pause on implementation in order to give countries time to work out some sort of trade deal with the US. And in the absence of a deal, the tariffs were due to kick in on July the 9th. Now the implementation date has been delayed further to August the 1st to give some countries time yet to perhaps work something out. On Monday, Trump wrote to the heads of government of several of these countries informing them that they will face a certain level of tariffs, and then he released the letters publicly simultaneously. The first two letters went to the heads of government of Japan and South Korea, each now facing a 25% tariff on goods they export to the US. Trump followed up the declaration of that figure in the letters with both threats and inducements. The threat, a familiar one, that if any country raises tariffs upon the US in return, the US would then raise tariffs further on that country by that amount, which is to say, of course, that reciprocal tariffs applied by the US are just fine. Any reciprocation of that by any other country to the US would be punished. The inducement was that these figures are not necessarily final, so that would leave room for a change and some negotiation, so that there's still a window to work out a deal before the tariffs kick in on the 1st of August. But that inducement is not without its own threat on its flip side. Trump has said that any of these numbers could change, but that does mean they could go up as well as down. By Monday evening, Trump had announced tariffs upon a very large number of countries to add then to Japan and South Korea. So Myanmar and Laos facing 40% tariffs now, Cambodia 36%, Bangladesh and Serbia 35% each, Indonesia, Bosnia and South Africa 30% each, and then Tunisia, Malaysia and Kazakhstan 25% each, the same as Japan and South Korea. So after the pause, we now have the upheaval, and no one quite knows where it will end, which way it will all go. Trump can change his mind at any time when we now have his word for it, as we've had for some time, really. These are countries as listed where a deal could not be worked out through the 90-day period, but we are also waiting to hear of deals that may have been worked out, none more than India. We've heard much over recent days that an India deal is around the corner, but we haven't turned that corner yet. We have so far, the US has so far, only a limited deal with Britain and an odd one with Vietnam, where 20% tariff on exports from Vietnam, 0 on US imports into Vietnam. Not many will follow that model. of the countries listed, not many have rushed in to sign an agreement with the US. And given Trump's ways, really, an agreement may count for little even if it is reached.
Good evening, you're watching Brass Tacks. I'm Zakir Jacob. The issue of Marathi pride is taking centre stage in Mumbai and Maharashtra ahead of the local body elections there. After some rank hooliganism which was on display over the last few days by thugs belonging to Raj Thakre's MNS party, today his party took out a protest in the outskirts of Mumbai in places like Thane, Mira Bhayandar, etc. They had a surprising supporter in a sitting minister in the Maharashtra government, Pratap Sarnaik, who tried to go to the venue. He then dared the police to stop him. Of course, there was a huge fracas that then happened between the minister's supporters on the one side, the police on the other.